Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be trying out the QOR Watercolour Ground on a pre-primed and gessoed piece of masonite. I've painted on these with gouache in the past and it doesn't really work that well. It's a little too resistant. They're more for oils or acrylics. So I wanted to see if the watercolor ground would make it take gouache better, and also see how it took watercolor as the underpainting. On this sort of board, you definitely would never use watercolor for any part of it because it just wouldn't absorb. And I am using designers or artists gouache for the record. That is the water soluble type. I am not using acrylic gouache. So let's get into the process here as directed on the little tin of the QOR Watercolor Ground. I did 3 layers, let them dry for a long time, and then I also sanded it because it had sort of an interesting texture and I wanted to see if I could get it to go away. Turns out not really. So I just rolled with the texture and started doing my underpainting and saw how it went. It did some really interesting things, and the textures reminded me of a particular artist. Well, actually it reminded Finn of a particular artist, and he brought the book along to show me. And his work is sort of, yeah, this scratchy, negative, working backwards type watercolor painting, and it looks really neat. So that's sort of what it was reminding me of at first. Here's a book cover by that artist. I'll include his name in the description below, and I will also include a link to the QOR Watercolor Ground if you're interested in grabbing it for yourself. This is not sponsored or anything. This is just something that was recommended to me by you guys to try out and let you know what I thought. So once the watercolor dried, it had sort of this weird texture on it. So basically what that told me is that the pigment is not sinking into the watercolor ground all the way. It's drying strangely and doing some other things strangely, and this might be because I used it on a particularly non-porous board. Maybe if you used this on paper, for example, paper that's not watercolor paper, so then you can use the ground on it and maybe it'll soak in better. I just wanted to try out a very extreme way, just to see you know, the capabilities of this product, using it on a paper like craft paper or construction paper, you know, something that's not designed specifically for watercolor. Maybe that would work better. But anyway, I decided after seeing how the watercolor dried that working particularly watered down wasn't going to give me the effect that I wanted, so I ended up using my gouache more in the way that I would use oils or acrylics. So I used a lot of it straight out of the tube. I did a lot of wet into wet mixing on the board, as you can see, and I just kept it loose. I only used a little square brush, and I do like how it turned out. Is it my usual style? No, but it's also not my usual technique and not my usual ground that I would typically work on. So for this piece I used a limited palette. I used Quinacridone Gold by Roman Schmal for the underpainting, and then for the gouache I used a mix of burnt umber, raw sienna, perylene violet, Chinese orange, and permanent white. So kept it really warm, really fall, really October, November. And the reference photo that I'm using for this still life painting comes from unsplash.com, which is actually a really good resource for practicing, and both for painting and referencing, and also for practicing graphic design work. So unsplash.com is a free stock photo website, and you can get some really good photos on there. I'll just point out to you here some of the strange textures that have happened. First of all, because it didn't really hold on to the pigment of the underpainting, some of that Quin Gold seeped under the tape, which is kind of a pain. I will clean this up with a little Q-tip in a little bit, but I'm not looking forward to it. One other thing here is that some of the gouache is crackling, which is interesting. That does tend to happen if you use gouache really thickly, but I haven't had that happen to me in like years. So crackling, very interesting, very much sort of an oil painting trait, not a gouache trait. And then you also get sort of this bubbly looking texture down here, especially where the underpainting is showing through. So these are neat. I'm not at all disappointed about these interesting textures. In fact, I'm rather curious about them, and I might try using this ground to scan in interesting textures that I can use in my graphic design projects and my digital paintings. So we'll see how I decide to use that in the future. But as for my opinion of the QOR Watercolour Ground, first off, probably meant to be used on paper. That's just my theory, but it did work on here and it is sticking on here. So, you know, it's not a total bust. You could probably use this on sketchbook covers to paint on your sketchbook covers, and that would be a really cool way to use this. Do I think this is making painting easier for anybody? No. There's extra steps for the prep, and I don't think it's going to make your life easier. I don't think it's going to be great for beginner painters. I think it's going to be good for people who want to experiment, people who want to see some unexpected textures, and people who just want to play around, you know, or, you know, if you're looking for a way to shake up your practice, you know, maybe it's getting stale, maybe try this. I don't know. It's a good price for a big batch of this watercolor ground. I'm not going to run out anytime soon. And maybe it's the thing you've been looking for. I don't know if I've been looking for it, but it was fun to try anyway. And I'm actually quite happy with this painting. I think it's cute. I hope you guys are having an okay November so far. I know things are a little topsy-turvy, to say the very least. If you're interested in supporting me in my work, I have links in the description below to my Patreon, as well as to my Ko-fi, however you want to say that, and my Etsy shop. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!